Hey everybody, today we're talking military science fiction once again, but this time I'm going to roll out what I think of as the ultimate military sci-fi TBR list. One of the reasons why I think it's so great is because it's based in large part on your inputs. Plus, this time I need to correct a big mistake from our last video. Please join the conversation. Hey everybody, welcome to D3 Reads. I'm Eric, thanks for joining us. Today we're talking once again about one of my favorite subgenres, military science fiction. So if you subscribe to us, you may remember that a couple months ago we did a video called Best Military Science Fiction Books. And the purpose of that was to kind of lay the foundation, to talk about the classics, the authors and the books that set the stage and inspired generations of military science fiction to follow. And after we dropped that video, we had tons of fantastic comments that came in that were recommending favorites and books and authors. And what we promised to do from that was we were going to build a master TBR list. And that's exactly what we've done. So over at our website, damper3.com, we have now the master best military science fiction TBR list. It's a list of 34 books, most of them books that you all recommended that you all consider some of the best military science fiction or just good reads for the military sci-fi genre. So we have that there. If you're new to military science fiction and you want to know some good ideas, check out damper3.com. If you've been into military sci-fi and you want to see if there's some new ideas for you, check it out. It'll do you good that way too. So what we're doing now, the purpose of today's video is to kind of start building on that first one. And we're taking recommendations that you all have made. We started prioritizing which ones are considered some of the best and going to tackle those first. So sometime in November, we're going to publish an updated best military science fiction books. And it's going to include everything that we've covered so far, from the first 5, John Stakely's Armor, Orson Scott Card's Ender's Game, Starship Troopers, Forever War, and Old Man's War. We're going to have that on there, but then we're going to start racking and stacking all the new ones that we've read in. So the purpose of today's video is I'm going to show you what we're reading now from that TBR list. Now, the way we prioritized it, though, is we took the list that you can find on damper3.com, and then we compared it against Goodreads. They have a list of best military sci-fi reads as well. They were voted on by a few hundred military sci-fi fans. And so any book that we hadn't read yet that was on that list, we moved it up and we prioritized it that way. So we're going to jump into the list of the 5 books on our current that we're currently reading on the TBR. If you're reading military science fiction now, or any science fiction really, let us know in the comments what you're reading. If you think that there's other books that we'd be better served exploring sooner rather than later, let us know that too. Just right before we get started, I did want to point out that, like the first video, I did a little bit of digging because I find it interesting if the author of military science fiction books did any military service themselves. Some of them did, some of them didn't. That doesn't make them better writers or not better writers if they served or they didn't serve, but it does help to color their writing, and it gives us, I think, some fresh perspective on maybe what inspired them to create the worlds that they created and how they created them. The first one we're going to talk about is to correct an oversight from the first video. If you remember the first video, I said that we were covering classics of the subgenre, right? The ones that helped inspire subsequent books and authors. We left off, I think, a really important one. The one that we left off was Gordon R. Dickson's Dorsai. So I appreciate those of you that recommended it and pointed out that, hey, this one was pretty formative and important in the formative years of many a military sci-fi author. Now, Gordon R. Dickson himself was a military veteran. He served in the Army in 1943 to 1946, so on the second half of World War II and into the post-war years. The only thing is, I don't know what he did in the military. I couldn't find that, but that clearly had some impact on him and his subsequent writing. Now, Dorsai was published in a magazine as a series of stories in a magazine. I forget the name of the magazine, in the 1950s, but was published as Dorsai, or the Genetic General, I think was the original title, and then it was published as a book in 1960. as Dorsai, the first of the Child Cycle series. This book is interesting from a number of perspectives. I've started it. It's engrossing from the get-go. See, in this world, humanity is spread out amongst the stars. I think this is like the year 2500, or excuse me, it's like the 25th century. Humanity spread out in the stars, and they've kind of broken up into 14 different worlds. They've populated 14 different worlds, and each world kind of specializes in its own resources and skills, and they trade amongst themselves depending on the types of skills that they have. And the Dorsai are a group of warriors. They're a race of superior warriors, and they sell their skills out to the other worlds. Well, the main character is a young Dorsai named Donal. And Donal is just come of age, and he is going out into the world to make his mark, right, as essentially a hired gun. Now, we're told from the beginning of the story that Donal is a classic kind of Dorsai warrior, right? He's got the right temperament. He's got the Dorsai rage. He can summon this Dorsai rage that helps him become just a fierce warrior. But there's something odd about him, but we're not really told what yet. His family realizes it, his teachers realize it, and he, at some level, realizes that there's something odd about him, but he can't put his finger on it. That's what's going to help shape his journey through the story. Now, what's interesting is the beginning of this publication that I have, the foreword is written by none other than David Drake. David Drake points out that whereas Starship Troopers, which again was published about the same time, focuses on the development of the individual soldier in this futuristic world, Dorsai kind of focuses on the development of command level thought and responsibilities. And so I'm eager to see how that plays out. So thank you for recommending Dorsai. I apologize for leaving it off of the first list. Our next book, we're going to go ahead and segue into David Drake's Hammers Slammers. Now, Hammers Slammers is a collection of short stories that David Drake published in the 1970s, I believe. Drake himself was also a military veteran. He served as an interrogator in Vietnam for a couple of years for an armored unit, armored cavalry unit, I believe. And so that clearly shaped his perspective and his creativity as he became an author. Hammers Slammers is about a futuristic armored military unit. They're kind of a mercenary unit. I've only gotten a couple of chapters into it, and it starts off really, really strong. In fact, if you've ever served in the military and been over into Iraq, Afghanistan, that sort of thing, it kind of speaks to you. Even though this is written in 78, the stories I'm into now are in the 70s. It starts off in a patrol out in kind of this area where there's a lot of unrest, and it kind of speaks to you if you've ever been in that kind of situation. The story is creative. I'm really enjoying it so far. I'm eager to see how Hammers Slammers develops. Next up is Dauntless, the first of the Lost Fleet series by Jack Campbell. Now, Jack Campbell is actually I didn't know this. Jack Campbell is actually a pseudonym. It's a pen name for John Henry. But the Lost Fleet series is interesting. So John Henry is a retired U.S. Navy officer. He graduated from the Naval Academy in 1978, and since he retired as a lieutenant commander, I assume he only did about 20 years, so he would have retired in 98, so before the 9/11 and the War on Terror. His fascination or his experience with the Navy clearly shaped his work writing about this fleet. In the foreword to the book, he says how he was kind of fascinated with this idea of a long retreat, how that would be handled in space by a massive fleet. And so he has this character, Jack Black Geary, that was his nickname, Jack Black, Captain Jack Black Geary, who is a hero from a century before the story takes place, who is involved in this pitched battle, and he wound up buying enough time for the good guys to escape. And so he was considered lost, but turns out he's really just in stasis and just floating out there in space until he was recovered a century later, right in the middle of the action of where Dauntless starts up. And so situations arise where he's put into command of this fleet, and now he's got to deal with not only the enemy, but also his own people's kind of expectations of him as a long lost hero of mythic proportions. Geary is a fascinating character. If I have to put all my cards on the table right now of all the books that I'm reading right now, this one so far is my favorite by far. It's got lots of good action. The sci-fi and the military sci-fi in particular is solid. I really enjoy it. Some of the character interaction, there's a lot of exposition at the beginning of it. I feel like he was trying to that the author was trying to cram a lot into the main character's headspace to kind of explain his position. So I kind of feel like he got a little bit more telling than showing. This book so far, like I said, is my favorite I'm reading of the books that we're covering. I'm really excited to see where this goes and where the rest of the Lost Fleet series winds up. So fourth on the list is Shards of Honor by Lois McMaster Bujold, I think is how you say her name. Now, Shards of Honor, it's kind of, I'm kind of cheating a little bit here because it was recommended in at least one of the comments that was left on the last video. But the thing is that when I compared it to the Goodreads list, Shards of Honor actually isn't really high on the list. It's like number 48 out of the, that's pretty good when you're talking about a couple hundred books. Shards of Honor is the first book, what's called the Vorkosigan Saga. And the second book of that series is actually The Warrior's Apprentice, I think. That's actually number 8 or 9 on the Goodreads list. But I'm not going to start a series with book 2. So to get there, I went ahead and bumped up Shards of Honor to be higher on the list so that I can read it and I can kind of get a sense of what's going on. Now, the Vorkosigan Saga takes place in a galaxy that's populated by humans. So humanity's been out colonizing, what have you. But of course, there's a lot of conflict between various groups of human planets. And in this first book of the Vorkosigan Saga, we have Captain Cordelia Naismith, and she's not a warrior per se. She's part of the military of her planet Beta, but she's a more of a science officer, and she's leading a scientific expedition to this world. When she comes back to her camp to find it's been destroyed by an enemy group. Now, she doesn't know who at first, but she winds up getting captured. She and her ensign wind up being captured by an enemy soldier by the name of Vorkosigan. Now, this Vorkosigan guy, clearly there's something going on here because he's by himself and he looks injured as well. Like he's been like maybe he got hurt in this ambush of Naismith's people, but turns out that there is some kind of drama going on with his own forces. Apparently he faced some kind of mutiny. And so he's taken Naismith and this ensign who has been hurt in this ambush. They use some kind of neurological weapon against him, so he's not, all his faculties aren't there. Vorkosigan is now has got Naismith as a prisoner, and he's leading them to a weapons cache so that he can make contact with his people again, those forces who are loyal to him, try to find out how this mutiny happened and that sort of thing, and that kind of thing. And so he's got Naismith as prisoner, and the world building so far in this book has been pretty cool. I really like it. The creatures and the things that they're having to deal with as they're traveling to this weapons cache, being slowed down by the injured ensign, is pretty neat. It's engrossing, really. But I have to admit, I'm kind of struggling a little bit with the character developments, just a bit, because here we have a situation where Captain Naismith finds that her party, her expedition has been ambushed and people killed, and Vorkosigan may or may not have something directly to do with it. His soldiers certainly did, whether or not he did or not, and she's already kind of being smitten by his charm, his looks, and that kind of thing. And that just is, I'm not looking for romance, I'm looking for military sci-fi. So if you've read Shards of Honor, please let me know. Tell me to just stick it out. It gets better in that respect. I'm going to keep going in it, but I'm kind of got a little bit of a flag being thrown because I feel like the author is trying too hard to set up this dynamic between the two characters. I mean, if you really think that this guy may have murdered some of your fellow soldiers, you're not going to sit there and think, wow, he's got a really nice smile. Finally, on our current TBR that we're reading is David Weber's On Basilisk Station, the first of the Honor Harrington books. Now, Honor Harrington ranks high on Goodreads. It was recommended by a number of you all, so I was really excited to read it. I'm digging into it now. The setup, I think, is really cool. I really like this idea of Honor Harrington kind of getting her first major command of a more or less modern. I mean, I realize it's not super modern because they're refitting it. Modern warship. So Weber does a good job setting this up. Oh, by the way, Weber was not in the military. I think he was a game designer, and that's where he started writing. So I'm real excited to get into it. Again, I've only really just scratched the surface. I think I'm like 3 chapters into this. I will say I'm a little put off by how much time Weber spends telling us how she's good looking, but not too good looking kind of thing. I get the impression, and maybe this is just because this was his first book with the Honor Harrington series, and maybe matures a little bit. His writing matures a little bit as he goes along. But I'm a little bit turned off by the fact that I'm being told that her almond-colored eyes and this and this. It almost comes across as a guy's idea of a heroine versus just a strong heroine character. Again, if you're a fan of the Honor Harrington series, please feel free to tell me to chill the heck out. That's just kind of a character development, and it gets better from there. But the storytelling part so far, I have no problem with it. I really like kind of the setup and kind of the question on, okay, why exactly has she gotten this particular command at this particular time? So Honor Harrington series, diving into it now, and I will wrap that one up by November when we put out our next installation of the best military sci-fi. So that's what we got going on now. Let me know what you're reading. Let me know if you think I'm wasting my time or my criticisms so far are warranted or unwarranted. Really appreciate your all's time. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh, by the way, we're going to be putting out our ultimate TBRs for fantasy and horror for Halloween. So keep an eye out for that. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. Take care.